Like every new technology, DNA testing comes with its perks, its pitfalls, and as writer Margaret Atwood once put it, a downright foolish side that you never thought about until recently. 72-year-old Washington native Emma Carter made a choice that would turn her world upside down. She sent in a spit sample for a casual DNA test. Since both of her parents were devout Irish-American Catholics, Emma assumed she knew what her genetic report would reveal. But when the results arrived, Emma was stunned. She wasn't the person she believed herself to be. This discovery set Emma and her siblings on a long quest to piece together the mystery of their origins. Hi everyone, here's a story about the hidden side of DNA tests and how one woman unearthed a family secret that stretched back over a century. Before we go any further, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more amazing content, and hit that notification bell. For years, questions about her family had been on Emma's mind. Her mother, Karen, was passionate about genealogy. She kept an old family ledger with handwritten names, birth dates, and death dates of relatives. Emma could easily trace her mother's lineage. Her mother was Irish on one side and Scottish and English on the other. Some of Karen's ancestors had even come to America in the colonial era, and Emma managed to trace them all the way back to the 16th century. Yet every update to Karen's branch of the family tree filled Emma with guilt because her father's side was an entirely different story. "My dad had nothing. There was no record of him," she later explained to journalist Megan Davis. Emma's father, David Carter, was the son of Irish immigrants who had little knowledge of their past. His mother had died when David was just a baby, and his father, unable to care for him and his older siblings, had placed them in a Catholic orphanage. David didn't even know his true birth year, mistakenly believing he was 1 year older than he really was. As he got older, Emma decided it was time to dig into his background and figure out where he really came from. Before starting the investigation, Emma already knew a bit about his childhood. She knew that life in the orphanage had been tough, and that, according to a doctor's opinion, David's small stature was likely due to malnutrition during those years. She also knew he left the orphanage in his teens, became a bit of a rebel, and later joined the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, before marrying Karen. She was aware that David had a sister who had died when he was young and a brother with whom he wasn't very close. David was a devout Catholic and even whipped up an incredible corned beef dish every St. Patrick's Day. But what Emma didn't know was where David truly came from and what had happened to his own parents. When David passed away in 1999, Emma couldn't tell him more than he already knew. In the years that followed, though, Emma managed to find some clues. She learned that David was born in a working-class neighborhood in the Bronx, New York. His father, Mark Carter, worked as a driver, and his mother, Nancy, died at the age of 32 when David was only 9. Emma also discovered the name of the orphanage where he grew up, the St. Agnes Home. Even though the school no longer existed, she tracked down the names of some of the nuns who worked there and wrote them a letter asking if they had any useful information about her father, besides his admission and discharge dates. Unfortunately, the orphanage couldn't provide any additional details. Years passed, and Emma's search yielded nothing. Then, in 2012, at-home DNA kits hit the market, and Emma was excited. She had just pinpointed what she thought was her father's ancestral village in Ireland, and was even considering a trip overseas to see where her grandparents had originated. Emma believed that a home DNA test would simplify her research, so she signed up on the company's waiting list. When the tests finally arrived, she and her sister Rachel both provided cheek swabs. A month later, when the results came back, Emma and Rachel were more than a little puzzled. Less than 50% of their DNA was of Irish, Scottish, and English descent, while the rest was an unexpected mix of European Jewish, Eastern European, and Middle Eastern. This baffled Emma, since both of her parents were from the British Isles. Surely the lab had mixed up the samples. Emma wrote to the testing company, explaining the apparent mistake, and decided to take the test again. When the same results appeared for a second time, she knew the report was accurate. Several questions began swirling in her head. Who were her real parents? Had Karen had an affair? Emma was determined to get to the bottom of the family secrets that had been hidden from her. If her parents were not who they claimed to be, then by extension, Emma wasn't who she thought she was. The DNA test results were just the beginning. They told her what was happening, but not why. Despite the daunting task of intense research and analysis, Emma was undeterred. She had worked as an IT manager at a university in California before retiring, and she'd spent most of her life processing data at a pretty advanced level. In 2017, she remarked that she enjoyed finding patterns in chaos and solving big mysteries with complex answers. Once she got past the initial shock, Emma dove right into the work. Perhaps her mother had an affair, or even her grandmother, but that scenario seemed unlikely. Cheating was out of character for Karen, and all of Emma's siblings still had their father's eyes. Yet one question continued to nag at her. My father was in the army and traveled the world. It's one of those uncertainties that leaves you unsettled. Emma told Megan Davis that she and her sister felt a strong hunch that the mystery stemmed from her father's side, especially since he had been adopted. Were David's grandparents secretly Irish Jews, or maybe Eastern European Jews who claimed Irish heritage when they immigrated to America as a safeguard? To investigate further, Emma had two cousins, one from each side, take a DNA test. The results from her maternal cousin came back as expected. They shared 12.5% of their DNA, which meant they were first cousins. But the results from her paternal cousin were odd. The test showed that Emma and her cousin, whose mother was David's sister, shared no DNA at all. In other words, they were genetically complete strangers, and not really cousins. This also meant that David's supposed sister wasn't actually his sister. Emma was frustrated by the findings. Not only was she back at square one, but she also feared being rejected by her father's family now that the genetic data proved they weren't related. With the test results laid out before them, Emma and Rachel concluded that their father, David, was not related to the people he had been thought to be. I truly lost all sense of who I was, Emma admitted in 2017. I felt completely lost, as if I didn't even know my true self. For Rachel, the test results confirmed a suspicion she'd had for a very long time. For years, she had felt that David's father bore no resemblance to anyone in her immediate family, and when she visited Ireland in the 90s, she noticed that none of the locals looked like her 5'4" dark-haired dad. Rachel had carried that feeling with her for years, and now, with the DNA results in front of her, her intuition was proven right. With her father and parents long gone, Emma and her siblings realized they had to solve the mystery of their father by reaching out to living relatives. Did David have any biological siblings? Did those siblings have any children? Could Emma and her siblings possibly have long-lost first cousins? By 2013, the Carter children were finally making progress on their father's mystery. They had obtained his birth certificate and learned that David had been sent to an orphanage by the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. Emma began to wonder if her dad had somehow been confused with another baby when he was taken from his home. Maybe the orphanage had accidentally mixed him up with another child. Following that intuition, Emma sent a forensic artist some pictures of her father as a baby sitting on his own father's lap, along with photos of David as an adult. Emma wanted to see if the faces in the photos matched. Yet once again, this lead turned out to be a dead end. The forensic artist confirmed that it was indeed the same person, which meant the orphanage hadn't swapped her father with another infant. Emma then considered another possibility. Could her father have been switched at the hospital? Was it possible that the hospital had made an error? Emma decided to take a closer look at all the babies born in the same hospital as her father in 1913. This wasn't an easy task. Not only was the list of babies born in the Bronx in 1913 159 pages long, but it was also unordered by date and didn't distinguish between home and hospital births. After carefully sifting through the records, Emma managed to narrow the list down to the names of children born around the same time as her father, whose names sounded either Jewish or neutral. Her final list had 30 babies. Emma hoped that one of these names might connect with living relatives whose DNA matched hers and her siblings. She went through all 30 names, but nothing clicked. Emma then searched through over 6,000 people tagged as potential biological relatives in the online DNA database. She spent 2.5 years searching without finding a match. At that point, Emma was ready to give up and wait for someone to reach out. Then, on January 18th, 2015, Emma's life took a dramatic turn. It was a Sunday morning, and she was feeling particularly low, so she decided to email her cousin, someone she wasn't biologically related to update him on her stalled search. After sending that email, Emma casually checked his list of DNA matches on his genealogy account, which she rarely did since new matches were uncommon. But on this day, there was a new person. A stranger had submitted her DNA sample, and the results indicated that she was closely related to Emma's cousin. Emma reached out to this stranger to ask if the results were what she expected. "I was really expecting to be much more Ashkenazi than I turned out to be," the stranger wrote back. Her name was Olivia Reed, and she had taken the test on a whim, hoping to learn more about her Jewish heritage. Instead, Olivia discovered that she was actually Irish, which Emma had not anticipated at all. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as she replied that her own grandmother had been born at Fordham Hospital on September 23, 1913. She asked if anyone in Olivia's family had been born around that same date. Olivia quickly responded with a yes. Her grandfather, Richard Benson, had been born around that time. Emma began to cry because she felt that she now understood what had happened, but she needed proof. She combed through New York City's birth records from 1913. There was no record of any Benson born on that day in the Bronx. But a few hours later, Emma finally found what she was looking for: a baby named Philip Bamson, born on the same day and at the same hospital as her father, David. This had to be Richard Benson. Emma felt deep in her bones that she now knew the truth about her father. There was no shameful family secret hidden away. Someone at Fordham Hospital had made a mistake that day. A mistake that only modern technology could reveal. Somehow, a Jewish baby had been sent home with an Irish family, and an Irish baby with a Jewish family. Both families were stunned. They compared the birth certificates and found that David and Philip had been processed one after the other and signed by the same doctor. Emma then started researching how hospitals used to keep track of newborns, and what she discovered was shocking. She learned that hospitals really didn't have a reliable system back then. Most newborns were kept together in the same cart, which made it very easy to accidentally swap babies. In 1913, hospital births were still uncommon, and most hospitals hadn't yet developed a way to properly identify babies. Some hospitals placed newborns in a crib next to their mothers' beds, while others kept them in a nursery. It's hard to say exactly what procedures were in place at Fordham Hospital, since it closed in 1976, but it's safe to assume the latter was true. It wasn't until the late 30s that hospitals started giving mothers and their newborns identification bracelets. In 1913, nurses mostly relied on their own memories or on the mother's ability to recognize her baby. After the truth came out, the Benson and Carter families exchanged photos, and everything made sense. David Carter looked a lot more like Richard's 5'4" father and 4'9" mother, while a 6' Richard looked just like the grandfather who had once stood by David's side, according to Richard's daughter, Samantha Benson. The Carter sisters also had their own explanation for why their father wasn't as tall as his siblings. They always assumed that David had been undernourished while growing up in the orphanage, just as the doctor had once told them. Never in a million years did Emma believe that her father wasn't biologically related to his supposed siblings, a mystery that only DNA technology could solve. Soon, Emma discovered that she had a biological first cousin named Melissa Grant, the daughter of the sister David had never known he had. In 2015, Emma even flew down to Florida to meet her. Seated on opposite sides of a couch, the two women could easily be mistaken for sisters. They definitely shared the same DNA. Melissa recalled a story about when her tall uncle, Richard, was dating his first wife. His very observant Jewish parents didn't believe he was Jewish, and he had to produce his birth certificate to prove it. Little did we know it wasn't really his birth certificate, Melissa later told Megan Davis. The two families have stayed in touch over the years, yet neither can shake the lingering what-if questions. On one hand, both families are happy to have found each other. On the other, the revelations feel like a loss. How could Emma and Samantha come to terms with the fact that their fathers weren't who they believed? And then there were questions about religion. Was David Carter Jewish because he was born that way, or Irish because he was raised that way? And what did that mean for his daughter, Emma? Emma and her sister agreed that if their father was still alive, it would have been best to tell him the truth. But they also felt it was a blessing that David wasn't around during the era of at-home DNA testing. "My dad would have lost his sense of identity," Emma said. "He's been kind of spared that fate." Emma and her siblings also thought about what might have happened if their father had gone back to his biological family, the Bensons. As the Benson and Carter families exchanged photos, Emma felt a pang of jealousy. David wasn't supposed to have ended up in an orphanage. Emma often wondered what kind of life her father would have led if he had been raised by the Bensons, his real family. For one thing, Emma believed David would have grown up in a stable home, graduated from high school, and surely put his talent for mathematics to good use. Instead, David dropped out of high school, served in the army, and later worked as a prison guard in California. In the end, he made a decent life for himself, but Emma and her family couldn't help but mourn the lost possibilities of his early years. "When I was a kid in the orphanage, my dad even got an orange for Christmas," Emma recalled. Had the switch not occurred in 1913, Emma and her siblings might never have been born. The Carter children owe their lives to a simple error, a mistake made by a nurse in a moment of distraction with far-reaching consequences. It was a terrible error, yet how can Emma harbor resentment when, without that mix-up in 1913, Emma Carter's story wouldn't exist? The Carter children owe everything to that administrative oversight, or that brief lapse in attention.